Hey everybody, happy Friday. Welcome back to the whiteboard. This week we are talking about a really fun topic if you're into finance, investment, and how it ties into ad markets. We're going to talk about demand curves and how that impacts how you should be running your ad account. So first, let's talk about a demand curve, right? Every market has a demand curve, and this just represents the connection between efficiency and volume. In traditional ad markets, the demand curve looks like the polar opposite of this. As you buy more and more ads, you can negotiate more and more discounts, which means your cost per impression, all things being equal, declines with increasing spend. In digital ad markets, which are auction-based, the inverse is true. Right? This was one of the first innovations in digital marketing that really transformed how marketing works on a technical level. It is the same infrastructure that is used, for instance, in financial markets. And that insight can help you buy and manage your campaigns better. So if we take a very standard digital demand curve, and this works across every platform, all things being equal, it will look something like this. At very low volumes, efficiency is meh, right? You can maintain and get some really low-hanging fruit. That's what's happening here. As you go up, you start to see your performance take off. This is when you exit learning mode. This is when you start to scale your campaigns up. But then at some point you hit diminishing returns. And the cost gets prohibitive, but the number of results don't increase, right? This is what diminishing returns do. So what your goal as a marketer should be is to stay within these two inflection points as much as possible. Now, Google gives you a way to find those inflection points via the budget simulator. You can actually map what your incremental performance is at each individual spend level, budget level, or target CPA or target ROAS level. That can help you identify where things take off. For instance, if you start spending a little bit more, you might see the number of conversions double. The cost per conversion actually decreases as you increase the budget because the value of getting more data outweighs the incremental cost of the impression. Conversely, you can see when you reach diminishing returns and spending an extra $1,000 yields no additional sales or leads. That's what you see here. So what we want to do is take this curve and transform it into a way that you can actually buy media. So math is fun. These two curves are actually the same thing with a little transforms. But what you can see here is this. Right, this same curve translated over here means the following. Instead, I've changed the axes up a little bit to our targets at the bottom. So we're going from a very, very high target ROAS or low target CPA, right, very restrictive to very liberal targets. And here we have money. So what you can see is that as you start, right, with high targets, you end up, ironically enough, actually losing money because the fees you pay and the low volume of data and the volatility means that it's actually not super profitable. And as you scale up, you loosen your targets a little bit, you start to get into missed opportunities. This is where your target could have been lower. You could have gotten more sales or more leads at or below your target cost, but because your target was too restrictive, you didn't. That's what's missed opportunity. At some point, we get into this point here where it's an optimal spend, right near the top of the curve, and this conveniently maps onto this. These are the same locations, as you can see. Inflection point 1, inflection point 2, happy point in the middle. Inflection point 1, inflection point 2, happy point in the middle. And then if you keep spending though, you keep getting looser and looser with your targets. You give in to those auto-apply recommendations. You let Meta adjust targets. What you're going to see is the platform is going to try to recoup some of the surplus value that you have gained here. They are going to give you more and more conversions that are above your target cost, but average your total closer and closer to your target. So let's imagine you're a brand and your target cost per sale is $200. But up until this point, right, as you've been spending and spending and spending, you've gotten 10 sales at just $125 per sale. So you've spent $1,250, you've gotten 10 sales. Well, what's going to happen here is Google's going to start to average in sales that are $300 each, $100 over your target. But even when you average in 10 of those, right, that's $3,000, and you average plus the $1,250 that you spent going up the ladder, you're only at $4,250 for 20 sales. You are, from a mathematical standpoint, right at your target. But what they don't tell you is that you've given back a significant amount of the surplus value that you've gained. You've gotten 10 fantastic sales and 10 not good sales and averaged it into 20 average sales. You would have been better off stopping the spend here potentially, or restricting the targets, or pulling back the budget, because you could have then taken that savings and reinvested it in Meta, reinvested it in TikTok, used it to improve your landing page, right? You had 1,000 other things you could have done with that money, but Google recaptured some of it. And if you take this to its logical conclusion in any ad account, you will end up with maximum volume, but you will end up losing money because Google will recoup every dollar that you've spent, every dollar of surplus value that you've created, and you'll be stuck with the fixed cost of operating your program. That sucks. We want to avoid that. This is great at the account level, but let's talk about the ad level, because this is where the rubber hits the road. And I'm using a meta ad example here, but this applies to TikTok. It also applies to Google for an ad group or a keyword. What you'll see here is I've got performance, and I'm going to write this kind of big picture, and then time. So it's a generalized graph, but you can see the pattern in your ad account, and you're just going to have to substitute performance for the metric that you choose. What you see is when you introduce the new keyword, the new ad, the new creative, whatever, performance starts a little choppy. And for some of these ads, it never leaves this. And that's okay, right? This is just, it's going into the account. Sometimes, actually probably most times, your ad may never leave this point, and that's okay. But what's going to happen for some ads is you're going to start to see a spike up in both performance and spend, right? As the ad starts delivering, gets bigger and bigger share, right? This is where you actually want to invest more money in that creative, in that ad group, in that ad set, right? You want to pour money on, because as you are doing this, performance is increasing faster than your costs. This is good for you. This is where you are making money. And at some point, what happens is it starts to flatten, right? We've all seen this in an ad account where the ad account, the performance goes almost straight up. It's like a hockey stick. And then it hits a point and it starts getting choppy, which is what you see here. When that happens, this is usually when you're reaching a saturation point, or when the ad's about to tip over, right? If we go back to this graph, what we did here is you just rode this level up, and we are at the optimal spend, the optimal point. And we know the backside of the roller coaster ends poorly. So what you want to do here is maybe pull back on your budget or your targets, because this is choppy. If it starts to break out of this pattern up, then maybe consider adding a little bit more. But more than likely, especially in today's environment where trends move and they turn over so fast, this is a good time to pull back on your budget, because what you don't want to do is get into the profit incinerator. This is where Meta or Google is still pouring money into your ad or your ad set or your keyword, but the performance of that keyword is tanking. Because what that's doing is the same thing that happens over here with those $300 sales. This is basically Meta or Google recouping their surplus value that they gave you on the way up. They're trying to get it back on the way down. You don't want to let that happen. If you start to see this happen, you start to see one-day cost per acquisition spike way up. You start to see tons of spend going into a creative or into an ad group with no results happening. That's where you want to pull back on that budget really hard. Because again, we added the budget here. You want to pull it back before it gets all the way down. We want to make sure our targets are reset, because what you're going to do then is you're going to reestablish this baseline, so that if it does pop off again, you can again add more budget. But what you're not going to do is allow all of the surplus value that you created through smart, strategic, creative, and media buying to get taken back by Meta on the way down. So if you see this pattern in your ad account, know that it's not uncommon, but also know how to manage it. Pull back on the budget, make the target more restrictive, restabilize. Don't allow Meta or Google or TikTok to take back your hard-earned profits by averaging in higher than acceptable CPAs or ROAS. All right, hope this is helpful. Talk to you next week.